And we always begin with any questions or thoughts which have come up. And I know we've started the Torah. This week we read the Torah portion of Lech Lecha. We read the Torah portion of Noach and Bereshis. Actually, you know, as far as time-wise in the Torah, the parshas that we've read covered about 2,000 years. From here until the end of the Torah, we'll cover about 300 years or so. So we've gone through 90% of the time frame of the Torah. That's in the course of two parshas. Bereshis, Noach, if there were any questions come up with regards to the recent holidays. So let's start with if there's any thoughts or questions.
Can I have the honor?
Absolutely.
A good friend of ours, Tom Nelson, is always talking to me about, in the first chapter, Elohim, or Elohim, created the world, and maybe it may not be the proper name, but the first Adam was made by, it said, Asa. It's Adam, like us and behave like us. And beginning of the chapter 2, all of a sudden we have a new word called Hashem. Hashem Elohim Yatsa. That's not the same word as Asa. And it says he made Yatsarta Adam, and then he created Eden, and it's a garden be'Eden. He created a garden in Eden. And then he put Adam over there. And that's really very unique language. And the biggest thing, I know Moses was called Elohim, and the other identity was called Elohim. So we know Elohim is a really special word, but Hashem is the creator. So Tom Nelson and I would like to know your position on that.
You're right. It is very interesting, the beginning of creation and the way it describes Yatzar. So we'll try to address several things. Our sages tell us the first 32 times God's name is mentioned when it comes to creation, it is the name Elohim. Then we find the name of Hashem, or the Aleph and Daled, Nun, Yud, A-D-N, right? A-D-O-N-A-Y, is used later. So it is explained as follows. The name Elohim is very much connected to justice. In fact, Elohim is another name for judges. Elohim is a name, we find the term Elohim used to describe a judge also. So it says God created the world initially with the attribute of judgment and justice. But it was shortly after the creation of the world where God chose then to add an element of mercy to creation. By the way, you say justice, it also connects to truth. Truth is also connected to justice, because justice is very much based on truth, right? So, God created the world as a very just world, severity, and then God, it says that the Medrash even says God saw the world would not last on justice alone, and therefore God added the Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud name, which is mercy, so that there would be a added dose of mercy to the justice, which would allow the world to continue. Because truth be told, if the world was operating on justice alone, the world would not survive. Justice means that God says that as long as the world or its inhabitants, or most of its inhabitants, are following the path that I have created them for, then the world deserves to exist. If not, the world doesn't deserve to exist. So think how short-term the world would be. I mean, Adam sinned right away. And yet the world continued. Until the entire world, in the times of Noach, rebelled against God. Therefore, then even mercy couldn't save the world at that time. So it saved at least one person, which allowed the world to be born again after with Noah. But that's how it explains the creation was done with justice, and then God added mercy into creation. Because each of God's names is a different expression of God. So Elohim is severity, and the Hashem is mercy. And the word Kael is kindness. You know, the I'm saying Kel, but it's pronounced A.
Aleph Lamed.
Yes, Aleph Lamed. That's kindness. So you have kindness, you have mercy, you have severity. Each name represents something else, and that's the explanation there. Now, with regards to, I don't know the answer why it says, when it comes to the Hashem, it says Yatzar, and it comes to Elohim, it says Bara. Bara comes before Yatzar. Bria means creation. Yitzira means forming.
That's right.
So when you say God first created everything, and then God formed those beings into the various creations that they became. So it makes sense that Yatzar comes after Bara. Why is it that Yatzar is associated with one name of God and Bria with another name of God? That I don't know. Question. That's like, this is mystical stuff.
Very good.
Is that it?
Well, I'm waiting for Miriam. You have a question?
Not me.
Okay, so let's move on to. I did see, before we move on to that verse, which we're going to get into, I saw an interesting explanation, and I know we're already a few days after the holidays, but I saw a beautiful explanation which I shared on the Shabbos after Simchas Torah. It's an article. Some of you may have read anything from Tzvi Freeman. Some of Tzvi Freeman stuff. So he writes this. He says, the truth is, if you look back at the holiday season, it's very much a love story. And you go back to the beginning of Elul. Elul is the final month of the year, and you may have heard that in Elul we say the king is in the field, right? The king is in the field. And he says that's very much like a dating period between God and the Jewish people. We're dating one another. We meet in the field. It's a very romantic setting. And we meet, and we're in this period where we acquaint ourselves with God during that month. And then we date for about a month. And then on Rosh Hashanah, the first night of Rosh Hashanah, especially according to the Kabbalists, the first night of Rosh Hashanah, God turns to us and says, so, he proposes. He says, will you marry me? Will you accept me as king again this coming year? And we think about it for a night. And the next morning when we blow shofar is our way of saying yes. We once again accept God as king. And in case God didn't hear us the first time, we blow shofar again the second day. So that's Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is accepting God as king. So now God has proposed, and now we've responded. So now we got to prepare for a wedding. So we've got 10 days to prepare for a wedding. And in many ways, Yom Kippur is like the chuppah, is like the ceremony at a wedding. In fact, the chassan and kala, the bride and groom, the bride and groom at a wedding fast on the day of the wedding until the actual wedding. That's the custom. The reason is because it says that for the bride and groom, it's like their own Yom Kippur. The day of the wedding is like their own Yom Kippur. So they fast, and you see this correlation between the chuppah and Yom Kippur. It's a very serious time, just like the chuppah is a very serious time. At the end of the chuppah, what happens immediately after the chuppah? It says the bride and the groom go into a yichud room, right? They go into a yichud room. They're secluded together, which is compared to the final moments of Yom Kippur, which is called Ne'ilah, in which the doors are locked, and it says that we are locked in a room, so to say, with God. So the end of Yom Kippur is like the end of the chuppah, and what makes sense is that immediately afterwards, there's 7 days of celebrations, like the dancing and the singing of a wedding. And by the way, a Jewish wedding also is celebrated for 7 days. You celebrate the wedding for 7 days. There's the Sheva Brachot. So Sukkot is like this celebration which comes after the chuppah. So basically the whole holiday experience, starting from Elul and going till the end of Sukkot, is like that dating and marriage between the God and the Jewish people. And King Solomon very clearly describes our relationship with God as that of a bride and groom. But then what's the day after Sukkot? Or what are the days after Sukkot? That's marriage. And just like in marriage in real life, so the wedding is where the excitement is. And the lead up to the wedding, the build up, there's tension, there's excitement. But ultimately the successful marriage is not determined by how wonderful and how lavish the wedding is. Successful marriage is not determined by how exciting the dating period was. A successful marriage is determined by how the day after the marriage works out. How do they look when things are back to normal? That's really the beginning of the story of their marriage. In many ways, the same is true after the holidays. Okay, now we've had the whole process of the dating and the wedding, but now it's married life, so to say. Now it's that life in which we are committed to God and God to us. So this is where it's all at. It's all leading up to see how this will be. So the holiday, it's easy to look at the holiday season and say, oh, it's done, it's over. It's not done, it's not over. It's now all of that which we've thought about and done and prayed and studied and celebrated then is all for the purpose so that now it should be a happy marriage. Right? If someone has a lavish, wonderful wedding, but then a few days later there's no relationship between the man and woman, that's all failure. This is the goal. So in a way you could say it's the end of that season, but really it's the beginning. It's the beginning of what all that was leading up to. So that's just a thought with regards to the days where we are now. We just entered a month, the month of Cheshvan, which is known as Mar Cheshvan, which literally means the bitter month of Cheshvan. Why is it the bitter month of Cheshvan? Because it is the only month on the calendar without any holidays. So we go from the month which is filled with holidays to the month which is called bitter because there are no holidays in this month. There is no month like it. Every one of the other 11 months has some sort of holiday, maybe a major holiday, a minor holiday. The month of Av has a minor holiday called the 15th of Av. The month of Teves, the first few days are Hanukkah. The month of Kislev, the last few days are Hanukkah. Shvat, there's Tu B'Shvat, Adar is Purim, Nisan is Pesach, Iyar is Lag BaOmer, Shivim is Shavuos. So this is the only holiday, the only month without a holiday, therefore it's called Mar Cheshvan. So we go really from one extreme to the other. It's like, but as we said, we're not leaving that behind. This is marriage after the celebration, after the wedding. All right, but now on to a verse. You have two chumashim. Could I borrow one?
You want Tanakh or Chumash?
It's the same, right? The Tanakh has a chumash in it. Right?
Yes.
Let's talk about the creation of man. I always say I once saw a bumper sticker on a car. The bumper sticker said, I believe in the Big Bang. It says, God spoke, and bang, it happened. Okay. The Torah portion, when it talks about the creation of man, says, chapter 1, verse number 26. Vayomer Elokim, as was pointed out, it says the name Elokim. Na'aseh Adam betzalmeinu kidmuseinu. Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. And then man will control over birds and fish and animals. But those 6 words are very critical words. This is the beginning of creation of man. And God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Any questions that come up from these words?
Who's our?
Let us.
Yeah.
Who's us? Let us make man. Big problem, right? Who's us? Is there more than one creator for man? Okay. Any other question? Right. So the other question is, what does it mean that we are created in God's image? We hear that all the time. In fact, it repeats it. The next verse. Vayivra Elokim es Adam. Elokim created Adam b'tzalma, in God's image. So even though we're so familiar with those words, created in God's image, but what does it mean? How are we to understand that statement? Another interesting observation is that God says, Vayom Elokim na'aseh Adam. Let there be man. Let us make man. The rest of creation, it doesn't say, let us make whatever it is that God created. The words used until now are yehi, or. Or yehi, another example is yehi me'oros, when God created the sun and the moon. It doesn't say let us make a sun and a moon. He says let there be a sun and a moon. Let there be light and darkness. That's very different. Also, when it came to man, God says, let us make man. Well, why the difference? Everything is precise. Why not? Yehi Adam. Let there be man. Instead, let us make man. Again, we already pointed out, let us is a strange word. Nasa, Nasa is probably not strange, it's just different than what's been done until now. And again, what does Mibitzal mean in our image?
It's plural, nase.
Nasa, plural, what does that mean? So critical, so much of a pitfall. This word nasa is, because it's let us make man, such a clear opportunity to make mistakes, that the following fascinating episode happened. At a certain point, the Talmai king wanted the Torah to be translated into Greek. This is documented in the Talmud. One of the Greek kings, when they had control over Israel, wanted the Torah to be translated in Greek. But he wanted a literal translation. He knew if you go to the sages, he didn't want the sages to conspire together to translate the Torah for him into Greek. He wanted them to write it exactly literally. So what did he do? He had 72 sages, and he put them each in a room, and he said to them, no one leaves their room until they translated the entire Torah. And there's no communication with one another. Not a lot of text. He said, you're not allowed to communicate with one another. This way he was sure that if anybody were to change something, they would be in big trouble, because the other 71 would be translating it properly. So the Talmud says that by divine wisdom, I'm not sure how many changes they all understood certain changes which had to be made, and didn't translate it literally. I don't know, maybe 8 or 12 areas. I'm not sure how many areas, but there was a handful of areas in the Torah which they all understood they had to translate differently than the words, Hebrew words. One of them was this, that they all translated, instead of Vayomer Elokim Na'aseh Adam, that God said, let us make man, they wrote Vayomer Elokim E'eseh Adam, which means, and God said, I will make man. Because it was such a clear concern that if they translated, the Greeks would say, you see, there's us, and there's more than one creator. That's how significant it is. The Medrash even says, when Moshe was transcribing the Torah according to the word of God, and he came to this word, Moshe said, how can you say this? How can you ask me to write the word Naaseh? All you're going to do is cause people to sin, because they're going to say, here's proof that there's more than one creator. Which again just leads us back to the question, why does it say the word Naaseh? So Rashi quotes one answer. There's several answers to this question. We'll share that. Rashi quotes one. The answer he gives is, and he quotes from the Talmud. The Talmud says that God was teaching people a valuable lesson in humility. And what's the lesson in humility? That when a person, just as God, who is God speaking to on a very basic level? God was talking to the angels. But obviously God was the creator. But by consulting with the angels, by telling the angels, let us make man, God was saying that a person, when they are about to embark on something or try to do something, accomplish something, one should never assume that they know all the answers. That they should never fully trust themselves when it comes to an important decision in life. A person should always have the humility to turn to someone else, even someone beneath them, and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about this major decision? Because if God, quote unquote, so to say, consulted with the angels before the most important creation of all, the creation of man, then how much more so we should have the humility to consult with others before we make critical decisions, the humility to recognize that we need others to help us in our major decisions. That's what the Talmud says. Based on this, by the way, it's been pretty quiet. We're not putting everyone to sleep. If there's any questions, please.
No, we love it. Are you kidding, Rabbi?
Wonderful.
We love it.
Putting myself to sleep just here.
No.
Wonderful.
The point is, so.
But Rabbi, the second verse, it clarified the first verse.
And God made, right. But you see, clearly God was the creator. But the fact that he so to say, consulting is an act of humility.
Yes.
Consulting is saying, I'd like to know if I need some help with this. I need to know that I'm making the right decision.
In his consulting the angels, didn't they give all the reasons why man shouldn't be created, and
No.
all of a sudden it's oops.
So that's the funny point over here. That's a very
Okay.
good point. Is that when God consults the angels, what do the angels say? The Medrash says they looked at God. They looked at God and said, "So tell us a little bit about this man who you're going to create." God went on to describe what man's going to be. They said, as the verse in this, so the Medrash says, they quoted a verse from Tehillim. Ma enosh ki tizkirenu. What value is this man of which you are reminded of? And basically there was this whole debate between the angels whether they should or they shouldn't. There's a fascinating Medrash which also says God asked, you know what, give me a second, and I have it here in my notes, I believe, somewhere. God asked 4 elements within creation. Let's get to this. Patience for just a minute. One can sing a song.
Ubahu ha'ovdim.
Let's see. Okay, so here.
Rabbi, I'm so glad you taught me that song. It's a beautiful
Great song, no?
I love it. It's a great song.
Taught a new song this week at my Shabbos table also. Okay, let's see.
Well, we were working on today, Haktiva.
Hatikva. We learned how to sing Hatikva today, Rabbi.
Oh, so it says God asked 4 elements within creation. Should God create the world or not? Or humanity or not? So God asked chesed, kindness, the attribute of kindness. Kindness says yes, create man, because man will do nice things. God asks emes, truth. Should I create man? Emes said, don't create man, for man is filled with fallacy. God asked charity, tzedek, righteousness. Should God create man? And righteous says no. Righteous says yes, because man will give charity. Tzedakah, righteous. Tzedakah means righteous. Man will give charity. Finally, God asked shalom. Should God create man? God asked shalom for the advice of peace. And Shalom said, no, because man is going to be filled with conflict. So Medrash says, and obviously it's all very cryptic. What does that mean? What does it mean that peace, justice, but basically it's a very cryptic idea, but it's basically saying, looking at the world through these lenses, is it worthwhile to create the world? So to say, God looked at the world through the lens of truth, and truth said, no, this is an untruthful world. So God looked through the lens of kindness, and there is a lot of kindness. God looked through the world through the lens of peace and saw a very unpeaceful world. God looked through the lens of righteousness and saw there is acts of righteousness in the world. So it was 2 to 2, right? Righteousness and kindness says yes. Peace and truth says no. So again, another cryptic statement from the Medrash, but it says God took truth and threw it onto the ground. Thereby, there was only 2 to 1, and therefore God created the world. So this is we have to be able to try to decode what that means. This is like a very good. The idea is that somehow God was able to override truth to create the world. And maybe this is the idea of the second name which you were referring to, which was added later. That was God saying, we have to add a new name because Elohim is closely related to truth, or more severity. What? Justice, right. Din.
And gematria of Elohim is the same as Hateva.
Right, nature. Yeah. So the point is that you're right, you brought up a very beautiful point, that God did consult with the angels. It wasn't as if they all said yes. Which just adds to this point that it clearly wasn't about whether the angels were going to decide it or not. Because God was interested in creating the world and creating people, and whether angels agreed or not, that was going to happen. But I saw one explanation about that. That God spoke to. So we'll just detract this. All right. So this is the explanation that it was a lesson in humility, and based on this, and this requires a little extra focus. Based on this is an interesting explanation by a man named Rabbi Heschel of Krakow. He was a commentary, he was the Rabbi Heschel of Krakow. He said there's a Talmudic statement which says, he who is arrogant, it's as if he is idolatrous. Arrogance is related to idol worship. Why? What's the connection? So, on a basic level, it means that one who is arrogant usually is someone who is not aware of the presence of God. Someone who is constantly in a state of awareness of God's presence, how can you be arrogant in the presence of God? Right? That's a simple explanation of that. But he says, he gives it a twist. And it says like this. Why is someone who is arrogant like idolatrous? He says, because the words, he says, it's based on this verse. The verse says, let us make man. So, if you learn it the way which the Talmud explains it to me, which was it's teaching you a lesson in humility. That's why God uses the word let us. God was, so to say, teaching us humility, that even God consulted the angels. So then you have the proper understanding of this verse. It's teaching you humility. But someone who's arrogant clearly doesn't learn humility in that verse. So then the only alternative he's left with is that there's let us make man. There's more than one creator, which is idolatry. So that's how this verse, a person who learns the verse properly clearly knows humility, knows it from God. If a person doesn't have humility, they clearly didn't learn this verse properly. The only other way to learn it is that there's more than one creator, so that's why it's idolatry. That's just a twist on how to understand that statement. Either way, but this is why it says Nasa Adam is to teach us humility. But this is only one explanation. There are some others which I'd like to share as well. One of them is that Naaseh, which means, and this is all important just because it tells us, it's about us. We're talking about us. We're not talking about something important. We're talking about the creation of man, which is Adam is the father of all mankind. So what do we say? That he is that God says, let us make man. The word let us could also be, it is plural. But maybe the plural is not going to, according to the Ramban, it's not talking about Nachmanides. It's not talking about plural of creators, but rather plural of elements from which God created mankind. The Medrash says interesting. It says if you look at the days of creation, there's kind of a pattern. You know, the first day of creation, God creates light and dark. Okay. But the second day, God is dealing primarily with the heavens, as God separated the lower waters from the upper waters, which is both heavenly waters. The third day, God is preoccupied with earth. The plants, the trees, the grass, earth. The fourth day, God is preoccupied with heaven again. Sun, stars, all the legions within the heavens. The fifth day, it's back to earth, with the birds and the fish. The sixth day, it's earth also, until mankind, until God wants to create man. And now God says, now we're going to do something which we haven't done until now. Until now, it's been one or the other. There are either elements which are created from heaven, from that which is spiritual, or that which is material. They are not multifaceted, single faceted, either material or spiritual. God says, Na'aseh, let us gather heaven and earth and form a creature out of both. And that will be mankind. That man is made out of two complete opposite elements. Heaven and earth come together in the human being. No other being has that. All other beings have either heaven or earth, not both. So Na'aseh, let us make. It's not let us make. Let us gather two completely separate entities. One which until now have been completely separate, and pull them together to form an entity called man. The Medrash says to illustrate this idea. God says, when God created the world, He spoke to the angels. We have a lot of such Medrashim. He spoke to the angels, and He said to them, here's the problem. If I create man from heavenly being, as a heavenly being, then man will live and will not die. Yichya v'lo yamos. And if I create him from earth alone, man will die and will not live. In other words, man will die shortly afterwards, and then that'll be the end. What am I going to do? I'm going to create him from both Elyonim and Tachton, from heaven and earth. This way, even though the fact that he will live, but he will die. And even after he will die, he will then come back to life again. because he has both heaven and earth combined. So the plural of Nasa is about the plural, the various elements, because until then there was never a creation made of two elements. It was all one element. Yeah, I mean you have creations made of various elements within earth and various elements within heaven. But just as there's all sorts of different creatures within earth, there's also the different spiritual creations as well. But it was either spiritual or material. God says, nah, so we're going to now pull them both together to create a being.
Rabbi?
And now man becomes
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That
And now
is.
man becomes the connection between heaven and earth. We now connect heaven to earth and earth to heaven.
I
Because other
really,
creatures are limited to one
I
or the
really
other.
love the idea that I believe that's Hebraic or Jewish idea where we don't have a soul, we have a body.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, we have a body.
Exactly.
Wait,
Now-
there was just a discussion, could you explain it?
Oh, we say, you ask somebody, do you have a soul? Say, I have a soul. Say, no, my soul has this body.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
The main thing is the soul. The body is only
Got it,
addition.
okay.
Yeah, a doctor told me he was once at a slightly different wording, but the same idea. He was at some sort of lecture, and a rabbi, maybe it was a priest, I don't know, got up and said to the crowd, he says, I have a question for you. But raise your hand, who believes you have a soul? And, everyone raised their hands, or those who believe. He says, what I'm going to tell you may surprise you. I don't believe you have a soul. I believe you have a body. You are a soul. You have a body. Yes.
The word you used for heaven in there was what?
Elyonim is one word is used. Elyonim, which literally means that which is above. Elyon is above. It's another word which is used.
I hear Shemayim all the time.
That's the more common word used for heaven. But Shemayim is also like the skies.
Say the other word, please.
I mean, it's always going to be difficult because you're trying to apply a physical
Elyon?
word to a spiritual
Oh,
reality.
Elyon.
But yeah, so
Oh,
Elyon just means that which is
that's
above.
very
Ayin, Lamed,
Yes, when I
Yud.
say Elyon, it means
Okay,
spirituality.
you got
not
it.
heaven,
Thank
the
you.
clouds or
Okay.
Elyon.
So what creatures would have only heaven, what creatures would have only earth?
the spiritual, the angels, for example, and the spiritual creations. It talks about even Shadim. The most significantly souls and angels. It says when the day which Gehenna was created, Gehenna, which is what we call purgatory or hell, it was created on a specific day. It says it was created on Monday. Hell was created on Monday because Monday is the day. Monday is really. Listen, all days are good, but Monday is the one day of all creation where it doesn't say God saw it that it was good. If you look at the creation, every single day it says it was good. It was good. God looked and it was good, except for Monday. Monday doesn't say it. Tuesday says it twice. Monday doesn't say it. In fact, that's why Tuesday is considered a day of good mazel. That's the day that the word tov, good, was doubled on Tuesday. But Monday is about division, right? Dividing of the waters. So therefore, it has a certain. Torah doesn't want to ascribe the word good to division. So therefore, the word good is not mentioned on Monday. Now here's an interesting point. Based on this idea which we just said, so the human being is certainly the crown jewel of creation, unlike anything else. And the human being becomes the center of creation. We combine the center of heaven and earth. We're there. Based on this, a man named Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was a very illustrious German rabbi in the 19th century. And he says, what is the word to describe man? Adam, right? Where does the word Adam come from? Where does that name come from?
Adama.
Adama, which means earth. Okay, so he says, no, he disagrees. He agrees, but he disagrees. And he says, basically, explaining based on this question, you have the fruit, which is an orange, right? You have the color orange. Which came first? Was the fruit named after the color? Or was the color given that name because the fruit, called orange, had that name? I don't know. Does anybody know? It could be either one. So the same is true with this. He says we commonly hear this idea, which is that man was named after the earth. He says, no, that's not what it was. He says the truth is man is the most important thing that exists. Because the earth produced man, who was Adam, therefore the earth got its name because it produced Adam. So therefore the earth became Adam. Like a vineyard. Vin is from the word wine, right? So is it that the wine comes from the vineyard, or because it produced wine, therefore we call it a vineyard? Because Adam was so important, therefore the earth was called Adam. Therefore the earth became Adam. We're not named after the earth. The earth is named after us. So he says, if so, where does the word Adam really come from? It doesn't come from earth, because earth followed us. So where does it come from? He says there's another word. There's a word Hadom. What does Hadom mean? There's a verse in Yeshaya, which says, V'ha'aretz hashamayim kisi, v'ha'aretz hadom ragli. Which means, the literal translation is, God says, the heavens are my chair, kisei, hashamayim kisi, v'ha'aretz, and earth, hadom ragli. Hadom means a footrest. So it says the term Adam really comes from Hadom, which means footrest. We are God's footrest, because we are the being which was created to connect heaven and earth. So we are that footrest of that which is godly on earth.
That's what we sing on Shabbat.
What's that?
We do sing that song on Shabbat.
Hashemayim kisi v'ha'aretz hadom ragli. It's a haftorah during the parsha.
No, even on Shabbat when we sing it. Let me get it.
Could be.
Lehadom raglai.
Yeah, lahadom
Yes,
raglai.
that-
Right.
we
We say it
sing-
in
yes,
the,
we sing it on
in
Shabbat.
Chadodi.
Yeah. No, every Shabbat when we take the Torah out. Lecha Adonai Hagedullah Behaglora. Lehadom raglai.
Yeah, so
yes, it's there. Yes.
So he says that the real source of the word Adam is Hadom. And now that's where the name Adam comes from. And earth, because man was taken from earth received the name Adam. Because man was taken from earth. That's how Samson Paulus explains the power of man.
Can we, like Dam and Adam, that there is any connection with Adam?
With blood.
Yeah, Dam
I
is
think it's
red
something
and
else,
Adam
yeah.
is red.
But why red? Because what's the connection between Adam and red? It says Esav was the father of the nation of Edom, because
That's right.
Esav was red.
Yes.
But I don't know if it says that Adam is red, but Dam is red, and blood is red. So this is how it's explained in Nasa Adam. That's that explanation. I want to provide two more thoughts on this. One thought is like this, and this is also a very beautiful pshat, a very beautiful explanation of the word Nasa Adam. Let's remember it says there are 70 explanations to Torah. There's many explanations here. They all work together. They're not a contradiction to one another. There was a man who's named Moshe Meuhali, who wrote a sefer called Yismach Moshe. It's a famous sefer on the Chumash. And he wrote like this. He gives a unique explanation to the word Nasa Adam. He says, who is God talking to when he says, let us make man? So we said God talking to the angels. It says God was talking to creation. Some say God was talking to all of creation, saying, you are all responsible to give mankind what man needs. That's why you're here. It tells the earth and the rain and the trees. You're all there. We together will create man. That's one try. Basically, he could give something else. This is who was God talking to? When God said, let us make man, he said God was talking to man. That God created man and said, you and I together will create you. It's a very beautiful idea here. Basically, that God was saying, I am creating you imperfect. You will perfect yourself. So you, in essence, will be completing your creation. La'asot. Exactly. Because we say in the Kiddush, what do we say in the Kiddush? Asher bara Elokim la'asot. That God created la'asot. What does la'asot mean? Just say Asher bara Elokim, God created. What does it mean la'asot? So our commentaries say, la'asot letakim. That God created so that you will correct it. So you see the word la'asot means to fix. So na'aseh Adam, God is saying, use the same logic, because it's the same root word. God was saying, we will create man. You and I together will create you. It's like imagine you create a robot, but then the robot will have to complete its creation. It'll have to complete its own program. That's basically what God said. That's actually what God said. God said, I'm creating you. I'm not creating you perfect, though. You will perfect yourself. And by the way, this idea is expressed in a very practical way. And that is that 8 days after a baby boy is born, we circumcise the child. Now, a lot is spoken about the significance of circumcision. But one of the most basic messages is that God created this child imperfect. And God says, you will perfect the process. Because the circumcision will make this child complete. But it also symbolizes, because you can say, well, women are not circumcised, right? But it's symbolic. It's saying that just as we find this in a physical expression of this, that a baby boy, we complete the process of creation, the truth is that every one of us is born imperfect, and that we have to perfect ourselves over life. We have to perfect our characteristics. We're born selfish. We're born self-centered. We're born, unholy. And then we purify ourselves. We make ourselves better over the course of life. So Na'aseh Adam, who is God talking to? He says, let us make man. He's talking to man. He's saying, we will make you. I will do most of the work, but then I expect you over the course of your lifetime not to give yourself back to me as you were born, but to give yourself back to me perfected, better than the way you were created. Right? The purpose of life is not just to unlike a car rental, right? You rent the car, you're supposed to give it back in the same shape you got it. Life, you're supposed to give the car back in better shape. We're supposed to be better than the way we started. Otherwise, what's the purpose of being born if we cannot achieve any higher level than where we're at? So Nasa Adam, let us make man. Let us, you and I together will create man. That's another explanation of these words. And finally, we'll address one of the other questions. We won't get into the image. What does it mean to be an image of God? Because we don't have time.
I like the word likeness.
Image and God's likeness.
Yeah,
We'll
I
have
love
to get
that,
to that
yes.
maybe some other time. But we did ask another question, and that is that why does it say Na'aseh Adam as opposed to all of creation where it says Yehi, let there be light, let there be firmament, let there be stars in the sun. But all of a sudden it comes to man, it says let us make man. And the reason is simple as this. The truth is that when you talk about creation really happened all on the first day. In Kabbalistic terms, what's the most critical part of creation? What is the most godly part of creation was? It's called Bria Yesh Me'ayin. Something from nothing. I think it's called Ex Nihilo. Something from nothing. That's really what creation is all about. They talk about a magician who dies and goes up to heaven and says to God, I've learned all the tricks in the world. I was the number one magician in the world, and I'm not impressed with you anymore because I've learned how to do everything. I can all the tricks you did, splitting water, I can split water. To pull a rabbit out of a hat, I can do that. Whatever it is, I can do it. So I could probably even create a world if. So God says, really? Let me see. He says, sure, just give me some dirt. He says, You gotta get your own dirt. So the idea is that all of creation is nice, but the most godly part of creation was as soon as there was something created from nothing. Which, by the way, this is a very important element to the discussion when it comes to science as well. Science has made great strides in its theories, but science never really addresses this question. Science has not addressed, and I can't say I'm a scientist, but from my understanding, science never addressed the idea of something from nothing. So even the concept of the Big Bang Theory, right, for example, that's a theory where what happened, that there was this tiny, tiny atom or a bit of, maybe it was just energy, and then there was an explosion, which caused a multitude of explosions, and one after the other, which exploded into a whole reality. But you haven't even touched upon the answer, because you still haven't answered. Where did that first bit of energy come from? So all you've been able to perhaps suggest is how something and turned into something else. Well, that doesn't address the issue of creation. And creation is the most godly, is the most godly thing. And even if you were to explain how something tiny turned into something big, okay, fine. That's all right. That's logical. But where did that something tiny come from? I don't think it's addressed in science. The point is that all of creation in that sense happened on the first day. It says God created reality in the first day, and the following 6 days, God was forming that which was already created into the different elements which they were. So there was already what the Rambam talks about is the chomer and the tzura. The essence of creation was there, and then God had to choose that from that of creation should now be formed into this into grass and trees, formed into the sun. But it wasn't as if God created the sun from nothing on day number 4. That's not the case. It was taken from that which was already created and formed into a sun, formed into the moon, formed into animals. So that's why it says, Yehi are. Let there be, because it's not, Yehi or let there be is not a creation of something new. From that which already was, let there be now light. Let it be into, let that which is, which already exists, let it be light. Let it be an animal. Until the 6th day, until the creation of man. Again, for 5 days of creation, it was all about taking something which was created and forming it into whatever God wanted it to be. On the 6th day, God created man. And when man was created, true, man's body was formed from something which already existed. But man's soul was something brand new. And it says, a few verses later, God blew the soul into man. This was a completely new element in creation. This wasn't formed from something which was already there. This was something brand new. And that's why there's a different word used. Na'aseh, let us make. There's something brand new being introduced to creation. Not just something being reformatted or reformed. It's something new. It is a part of God being blown into a physical creation. Therefore, it's something. It is like it is it's as powerful as that first instant of creation. Not something from nothing. Now again, we're introducing something brand new into the reality, and that is that there will be a part of God blown into a being. So the body of man is not that unique. The body of man was taken from earth. We know that. But the soul, that's something which the world was a novelty to the world, 6 days old. And that's why the words are different. Because it's something new. Therefore, let us make man, let us create something new, which is the existence of a godly soul within a earthly body. That explains that word. All right, we'll stop here.
Very nice.
And what can I say? It's nice that God created us. It's good to be here.